Pretty soon here in the Escape From Tarkov community, we'll be hit with a wipe. Starting fresh with a wipe can be exciting for some, but also intimidating to others. This current wipe has been one of the longest wipes ever, so whether you're an experienced player or not, it's probably been quite a while now since you've had to worry about starting from level 1. So in this video, I put together a bit of a guide to help you through your first few days of wipe and show you some of the tricks that I use to progress more efficiently. Before we get into it, I'd like to take a moment to talk about this video's sponsor, HelloFresh. If you're anything like me, you'll be spending a ridiculous amount of time grinding Tarkov once wipe hits, so anything to help make real life a bit easier is desirable. That's where HelloFresh comes in, taking the hassle out of mealtime by delivering pre-portioned ingredients and easy-to-prepare recipes right to your door. You won't only save time shopping, but also preparing food, since there are quick and easy meal options ready in 15 minutes or less. On top of that, HelloFresh is cheaper than traditional grocery shopping and 25% cheaper than ordering takeout. So by joining today, you'll save time, save money, and stay healthy with what HelloFresh has to offer. To get a special discount and support the channel, click the link in the description below or scan the QR code or go to HelloFresh.com and use code POGHF112929. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today, but now let's get back to the video. Starting off, let's keep it simple with stash management. Stash space is something we definitely take for granted as we progress, since access to cases which expand our storage space become a lot easier to acquire at higher levels. But once wipe hits, we're back to nothing but our open stash, which fills up very quickly. A good solution to this is by stocking up on high-density rigs you find off scavs. What I mean by a high-density rig is a rig that takes up much less space than it holds. A good example of a high-density rig would be the Azimuth, taking up 12 slots but holding 20. While a low-density rig would be the Tarzan, taking up 12 slots but only holding 14. While a subtle difference, this does add up quickly, especially when you have tons of quest items, hideout items, meds, and ammo to hold on to. Another great trick is utilizing shotgun spruts for compact storage of tactical devices. With early wipe gun builds, it's essential that you utilize lasers, since recoil can be pretty rough early on, and lasers reduce point fire recoil greatly. So you'll want to keep each one you find, and spruts are a great way to stack 3 in a single slot. Another, more beginner trick is removing pistol grips and magazines from your guns in order to cut the amount of space they take up in half. It can be a little frustrating to have a bunch of half-built guns in your stash, but the extra space is definitely worth it. On the topic of guns, get in the habit of selling cheap magazines and ammo that you don't immediately need to use. While it may seem valuable to hold on to these, the stash space itself can hold greater value, since that room can be used for things such as quest items. Cheap mags and ammo can be sold and rebought as needed for very little loss, so in my opinion, it's best just to get rid of them. Lastly, get a scav junk box as soon as possible. Sure, they're a big hit to the rule count on the first few days of wipe, but again, the space is definitely worth it with all the items you're going to need to hold on to. Speaking of holding on to items, let's take a look at the hideout and crafting. You're going to need a lot of items for your hideout, so it's important to know what to hold on to and what to get rid of. As always, I recommend using the Tarkov wiki for this, where you'll be able to see if you need an item for either a quest or a hideout upgrade. I also recommend checking what you can craft using any item, because you might be able to craft something you'll need found in raid for a quest. Even though I've been playing the game for over 5 years, I still utilize the wiki all the time to check how many of each item I'll need. On the topic of crafting, there are a few choices I always make early wipe. One of these is crafting fabrics. I try to craft fabrics constantly in the hideout as soon as I get my lavatory going, because they'll be needed for various barters, ragman dailies, and eventually the textile questline. They're all relatively cheap to craft, and you can always just sell them for profit on the flea if you end up with too many. Another thing to keep in mind is holding on to all the gunpowder you find early on. It's typically not worth selling them early wipe because they don't have much value when everyone's lower level, but if you get your workbench upgraded, you can start crafting high tier ammo right away, giving you a major upper hand. One more thing to keep in mind is crafting with items that you can easily flip for big profits. An example of this would be crafting wires out of power cords. Players will frequently need wires early wipe, so sale prices on them in the flea will be heavily inflated. Look out for other crafts like these by comparing input versus output prices, since they're typically only inflated the first few weeks or so. On the topic of looting, I already mentioned keeping items necessary for your hideout, but even more importantly, you should be keeping items for quests. There are tons of quests in EFT which require you to find various items found in raid, and the sooner you find these items, the better. You should always have future quests in mind when deciding what to keep and what to drop. This can be tough for newer players, which is why I can't express enough the importance of the EFT wiki. Anytime you pick something up that you're unsure the importance of, look it up on the wiki. You'll see if it's needed for a quest, as well as if it's needed for the hideout. Even if you don't think the item could possibly be important, check the wiki because there are plenty that aren't obvious. Item priority should be as follows: found and raid quest items at the highest priority, hideout upgrade items next, and lastly, money-making items. While it is hard to make money early wipe, it's much more important to focus on any quest item you find, since having them prior to getting the quests will keep you progressing more quickly. On the topic of progression, there are tons of tips to keep in mind in order to maintain the fastest XP flow. First off, every raid should be directly progressing a quest. You'll be flooded with quests early on, so pick one that's most attainable and let that dictate what map you'll play. Within raids themselves, kill scavs as often as you can, but try to go for headshots. Each kill with a headshot gives you bonus XP, which can stack up quickly. With every body you see on the ground, make sure to at least begin looting it as long as the area is safe. Even without pulling anything off the body, you'll get a boost of XP, with amounts being higher the more items that are on the body. When you're actually looking to loot, make sure you pick up each item you see throughout the raid at least once, as you'll get more XP. For example, if you're looting a scav and they have an AKM, but you don't necessarily want it, still equip it or put it in your bag quickly, and then drop it. You'll get some light looting XP, another way just to add up your XP per raid. This will work once for each unique item per raid, so be sure to loot everything at least once, even if you plan on dropping it. Outside of raids, I just want to mention a couple things regarding progressing your traders. Of course, you'll need a complete quest for each trader to get your rep up, but when it comes to getting your ruble count up with them, you want to be selling to them all equally. It can be tempting to only sell things to mechanic or therapists when they're paying the most, but don't ignore the other traders. You don't want to get to a point where you need to spend or sell an extra 600k on a trader suddenly just to level them up. Make sure you're consistently selling to all traders equally until you have their transaction amounts where you need them. Next, let's talk more specifics about questing. Just to recap, I've already mentioned the importance of letting quests dictate what map you'll play next in order to progress quickly, as well as checking if every item you pick up is needed for a quest down the line. On top of these, another great method for progressing quests more quickly is quest stacking. Lots of time, you'll be hit with multiple quests from multiple traders for a single location. Or maybe you'll only have one quest for a particular location, and you want to wait for another trader's quest to be there in order to double up. Focusing multiple quests in a single raid for a particular location can be a huge increase to how quickly you level up. Sometimes it can be daunting to bring 9 markers into a single raid to mark things for 3 different traders, but don't rush and focus on one quest step at a time. This brings me to my next point. You don't need to PvP if the task doesn't ask you to. This is always a hard thing to deal with for me at the beginning of each wipe, because PvP is what I find most rewarding in the game. But unfortunately, PvP doesn't help you progress much early on. If you kill a player and it doesn't progress a task, you'll only get a little bit of XP and likely some junk gear. Stick to progressing your quests and surviving raids. A death right after finding some quest items can be devastating, adding tons more work and time to your progression. Another thing to keep in mind is not rushing to complete quests which don't lead to another quest. There are a handful of quests which don't progress a particular quest line and are more so just one-off side quests. You can typically complete these with time and focus on ones that contribute to a greater quest line or set of quests. Again, you can find this out in the Tarkov wiki for any quest. One more pretty specific thing you can do to speed up progression is leveling your sniper skill early on. You'll encounter quests from Jaeger, Peacekeeper, and Mechanic which will require you to hit a certain sniper skill level down the line. While there are ways to cheese leveling weapon skills, you can also level them fairly quickly just by landing shots on enemies with that particular weapon type. There are tons of scav killing quests early on, and Mosins are a strong and cheap option for killing enemies quickly and leveling your sniper skill. I recommend utilizing them whenever viable for early quests, as it's just another way to progress multiple quests at the same time. Lastly, let's talk a bit about surviving raids. As I said earlier, focusing on quest progression should be your highest priority at any time, but to progress quests, you need to survive. This is obviously easier said than done, because you'll be working on the same quests as everyone else in your lobbies, requiring you all to go after the same quest items and locations. The best advice I can give for this is unless you spawn right next to a quest location, you do not need to run there right at the start of the raid. For example, Prapper's quest checking requires you to open the tanker truck in the middle of construction on customs to obtain a pocket watch. A simple task, but with so many players also wanting to head there, there'll be tons of players with their eyes on it from every direction. Rushing there immediately will likely get you killed by someone hiding, waiting for their turn to hit the truck. A better play would be focusing on what's ahead, spending some time looking for your found and raid quest items, food for Jaeger, med items for therapists, tech items for mechanic, etc., and then heading to the truck. This way, you're still spending the whole time focusing on progression, but in the lowest risk way possible. Another bit of advice I can give is on what to be wearing in raids. You'll often see players build low quality kits early wipe in order to save money. My advice here is to always run the absolute best armor you can find early on. Nobody around you will have access to high penetration ammo yet, so even class 4 armor will make you feel like a tank. This even applies to quests like going for your pistol kills or close range Mosin kills on factory. I often see players running these quests naked with only a gun, only to die 40 times before getting the quest done. I end up questioning, why wouldn't you treat it like a regular raid? Run the best you have access to in order to give you the best survivability, allowing you to get the quest done more quickly. Something else to remember is that if you're a player that typically runs suppressed gun builds, you're going to have to get used to running loud weapons every raid. Every time you kill a scav, everyone in the map will know where you are. Every time you take a shot at a player from a distance, they, as well as every other player, will know exactly where you are. This is fine and can make for some pretty eventful raids, but with survivability in mind, always try to keep moving. Don't sit anywhere for too long, as it's likely that someone nearby knows where you are and will be waiting for the perfect moment to catch you off guard. Lastly, make sure you're equipped for every raid. Your metabolism skill will be low, so make sure you have food and drinks on you. Your access to quality meds will be low, so make sure you bring plenty of the cheap stuff in the event you actually take significant damage in a fight. Your ammo will take more hits to kill, so make sure you bring more than you'd usually need. You have to keep in mind that the game is a bit different as a lower level, and you should always be thinking how that affects every aspect of the game around you. And that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully this all helps you transition into early wipe a bit more easily and progress more quickly. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. But thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.